So I've essentially had this video finished for a few weeks at this point. But since I have burned myself in the past, I wanted to hold off on releasing it until we got some information on exotic armor and ability tuning for the final shape. And thankfully, earlier this week, the developer insight articles dropped with details on both subject matters. After reading through them, I'm happy to say we're in the clear to discuss NEZAREC'S Sin, in regards to both what this exotic is providing present day, but also I thought it might be interesting to speculate on if this exotic can hold its value once the final shape actually releases. And just a heads up, I did try to be pretty thorough. So if numbers and testing tend to make you a bit queasy, you might want to pop some thumbs before the video gets going. Or, the video is timestamped so you can jump around through the chapters. They're in there for you, not for me. I'm just appreciative that you clicked on the video in the first place. So we'll get things started with a quick overview. NEZAREC'S Sin's intrinsic exotic trait is Abyssal Extractors. Void damage kills increase ability energy recharge rate. And two things to note about that. It is referring to all abilities, class, grenade, melee, and super. And even though I did all of my testing in this video on Voidwalker, the exotic is not specific to the subclass. If you want to run this with Stasis Solar, Arc, or Strand, and I would assume it's probably going to work with Prismatic too in the final shape, just bring along a Void weapon. The big question though is how much ability energy are we actually talking about here? If we head over to light.gg for a more itemized breakdown, Void kills proc Abyssal Extractors for 2.5 seconds, and that can be built up to 20 seconds max. While it is active, we'll get 300% base melee and grenade regen, and 200% super and class ability regen. And I can confirm this is 100% accurate, but base is the key word here. If you head into your subclass menu and hover over an ability, it does give you the specific base cooldown time, and base is tier 3 in any given stat category. So it is at that tier and at that tier only that the 200 or 300% ability cooldown improvement applies perfectly. And we'll go over an example real quick. Vortex Grenade, base cooldown is 2 minutes and 32 seconds. I found that if I was able to keep Abyssal Extractors up full time through the cooldown duration, that grenade would be back up and ready to cast again in 38 seconds. Then you can work it backwards to make sure that the cooldown improvement is accurate. You take 38 times 4, which is our multiplier at 300%, and you get 152. If you break that down to minutes and seconds, 232, exactly what was listed in game. But as you move up into higher stat levels, you are going to get diminishing returns with each tier. And while you could probably go in and adjust things for each tier mathematically, for me it becomes a lot more tangible when I can actually see it in game. And my simple Ironworker brain does tend to process cooldown reductions better than it does cooldown improvements. Shaving a percentage off of a base number and knowing how much less time it's taking gives me a better sense of how much I'm benefiting. But when testing any one specific thing, in this case Abyssal Extractors, the goal first and foremost is to isolate, remove as many external variables as possible. Even if I'm 99.99999% sure that something is going to have absolutely no bearing on the results, if it doesn't have to be there, I don't want it there. I took off both aspects, which dumps all the fragments, so we got a clean slate in the subclass menu. Artifact mods were all unequipped, and any armor mods that were not stat boosters to get me to the correct tier were removed as well. Also, the same weapon was used to proc Abyssal Extractors in every test, Imperial Needle. This came out before the Days of Origin traits, and it has no ability boosting perks. Best I could tell, this was about as safe of a pick as I was going to find. The testing itself was time consuming, but pretty straightforward. First, confirm that the listed cooldowns were actually accurate, and everything was on the up and up in that respect. With that established, I could get Abyssal Extractors rolling with a few weapon kills, cast the ability, and then secure a few more kills to build the timer. So what this slice is showing us is Abyssal Extractors' effect on the ability cooldown with 100% uptime. Is that always going to be applicable in game? No, it is not. But given the adjusted cooldown times that I was seeing, it's honestly not all that big of an ask. Starting out with our Rift ability, which is affected by our recovery stat. I tested it at 3 different tiers, as I did with all the abilities I'm about to showcase. Tier 5, Tier 7, and Tier 10. The base cooldowns for each tier are separated by about 10 seconds as you go down that list, but with NEZAREC'S Sin on full uptime, Tier 5 and Tier 10 are only separated by 3 seconds. But even with the gradually diminishing returns, up at Tier 10 you're still cutting your Rift cooldown time in half. And potentially being able to throw one out every 25 seconds is a good deal in my book. Now remember, the Rift only had a 200% cooldown boost tied to it, so if we move over to the melee, we are going to see bigger returns. At Tier 5 strength, you are looking at a 1 minute and 16 second unadjusted cooldown, with NEZAREC'S Sin cutting 54 seconds off of that, getting your melee back in 22 seconds. And while the net reduction is 71% at Tier 5, at Tier 10 it does drop down to 60. Still though, that does put you in the realm of a sub 20 second cooldown. And while I don't tend to see many Voidwalkers prioritizing Pocket Singularity, Remember, NEZAREC'S is a subclass neutral exotic, so if you were, say, running the Strand Broodweaver, you're never going to be short on arcane needles. Moving on to our grenades, and you're going to see the same reduction profile that you were seeing with the melee, with both of these abilities getting the 300% boost. And on our Voidwalker at least, we have 3 different cooldown tiers within our grenade selections, so I tested one from each. For the quickest of the bunch, I tested the Magnetic Grenade, but this is also applicable for the Scatter Grenade. If you're running middle of the road Discipline at tier 5, NEZAREC'S is going to save you over a full minute on that cooldown. If you're maxed out, it's only saving you about 30, but still, that's a grenade every 20 seconds if you can keep Abyssal Extractors up. In the mid-range cooldowns, which would be the Void Wall, the Void Spike, or the Suppressor, because of the little bit longer standardized cooldown, we're getting more of a benefit at each tier. 72 seconds, 60 seconds, or 37 seconds saved, respectively. And that does put every one of those cooldowns at sub 30 seconds. So even at tier 5, if you kill 12 enemies with void damage within 2.5 seconds of each other, that grenade is coming back at the improved cooldown time. And for our longest grenade cooldowns on Voidwalker, which would be the Vortex Grenade and the Axion Bolt, if you're running mid-discipline, NEZAREC'S can save you 90 seconds, a minute 30 off the cooldown. But I do think most Warlocks do tend to spec a little harder into the discipline stat. But hey, tier 7 you're saving 74 seconds, and even at tier 10 you're still saving 46. So maxed out discipline, you can potentially be throwing a Vortex Grenade every 30 seconds in add heavy content. And I just wanted to do a little side-by-side comparison here before we move on to the super regen. I made a video a few weeks back that ended up kind of being a eulogy for Contraverse Hold. Some weren't too happy about that, saying the exotic is still alive and well in high-end content because the Chaotic Exchanger perk is hit activated and not kill activated. And that is a very fair point. But unfortunately, the exotic does appear to have been affected by the ability tuning with Season of the Wish. I would have never thought that an exotic would have got swept up in those changes, but since its exotic feature does function as a quick burst ability recharge, Contraverse Hold took that hit, while NEZAREC'S was unaffected. So if you put NEZAREC next to Contraverse with a tier 7 Vortex Grenade, its numbers are just better, and obviously this doesn't account for situational utility, but the best you're going to get from Contraverse by itself is a 58 second grenade cooldown, which is a 46% reduction if the grenade double procs. With NEZAREC, if there are enemies to be killed, it can get you that grenade back in 34 seconds, almost a 70% reduction. Now Contraverse is going to see better returns on grenades that have an inherently quicker base cooldown. And I think it is worthwhile to make a comparison here as well, because charged magnetic grenades, i.e. handheld supernova, is getting buffed with the final shape. 10% more knockback intensity, 20% more damage in PvE, and it will see its overall cooldown reduced by 10%. With NEZAREC'S equipped, as we saw earlier, with full uptime on Abyssal Extractors at tier 7 discipline, we will get that magnetic grenade back in 24 seconds. Now obviously this is kill dependent, while handheld supernova is a grenade that's probably best used to supplement single target damage. And that is something that's a bit more in Contraverse Hold's wheelhouse. Just by hitting a target with that handheld supernova, it is reducing the grenade cooldown by 35%. Tier 7 cooldown was 115, the Chaotic Exchanger boost got us that grenade back in 49 seconds, so we saved 26 seconds in total. If you factor in that 10% cooldown boost when final shape launches, that takes us down to probably 44 seconds. So if you just stick the raw numbers side by side, NEZAREC'S is still considerably better, especially when you factor in it's speeding up all of your other abilities. But if you are looking to get that grenade back quicker in a single target damage scenario, or if you're taking it into a piece of content where kills are not always readily available, you could make a solid case for Contraverse Hold's utility. Me personally, I just think NEZAREC'S has a lot more upside in a wider scope of activities, but I mean if your build, your playstyle, or the content that you're taking it into calls for Contraverse Hold, by all means. Alright, onto the super regen now, which is not nearly as straightforward to test as our abilities. It's just really tough to keep Abyssal Extractors in a vacuum in this sense. You are inherently going to gain super energy from kills, from taking damage, from dealing damage. It varies depending on the damage source. There's just a lot more factors at play. So what I did is I went through this lost sector and killed every red bar enemy in the initial wave, of which there were 30 of them. Then I sat and twiddled my thumbs until my super was back up. And I only ran this at 2 tiers, 5 and 10. With the Nova Bomb super at tier 5 intellect, the listed cooldown was 7 minutes and 31 seconds. The control cooldown, which entailed killing all 30 enemies without NEZAREC'S equipped, came in at 4 minutes and 52 seconds. With our exotic equipped and being careful not to overstack the cooldown timer, super was back and ready to cast in 2 minutes and 40 seconds for a 45% reduction from the control. At tier 10, base cooldown 623, control cooldown 410, and with NEZAREC'S equipped 216. And the net reduction here, about the same, 45.5%. There probably should have been a bigger discrepancy here, but at tier 5, we were waiting an extended period of time at the base recharge rate. Now, I really didn't feel like this test provided a solid window into what could actually be accomplished. So I kind of ditched the scientific approach, said I'm just going to put on my standard Void build, run through this lost sector as if I was actually playing the game, and see what happens. I'll put a dim link to the build that I was using down in the pinned comment if you do want to check it out. There's really nothing special tucked away in there, it's just a solid loadout that I've been using for a long time, and that's gotten me through a lot of content. And I still did feel it was important to run a control for this process, so I threw on my standard Void build, just minus NEZAREC'S. In which case, my super was back up in a pretty darn quick 2 minutes. Granted, Graviton Lance, Exotic Primary, lots of super energy to be had there. With NEZAREC'S thrown into the mix though, it went sub 1. 57 seconds, a minute and 3 seconds better than the control. Now, I wouldn't turn my nose up at a 2-minute super to begin with, but to see a 1-minute super in an encounter that doesn't have exceptionally high ad density, I'm very, very happy with those results. Would I say I'm surprised by these results though? Not at all. Like I said earlier, I use NEZAREC'S a lot. I'm pretty well versed in what it's capable of. But it is always nice to get some solid figures for it. And if you do want to take a side-by-side look at any of these tests that I ran, I will have the full infographic up at the end of the video. But I don't think a long-winded explanation is really needed to highlight why NEZAREC'S is useful. If there are enemies to be killed, every single ability in your kit, whether you're spec'd hard into the stat or not, can be on a very quick cooldown. And they absolutely can be boosted further by external means. And ever since Beyond Light, I'd say, the enemy density and activities just seems to be going up and up. So I mean, we're not short on opportunities to get NEZAREC'S going, and keep NEZAREC'S firing on all cylinders. Is it the absolute best end-all be-all exotic for every single situation? No, but I really don't think that can be said about any exotic. What I will say about NEZAREC'S though, if you are packing void damage, it's simple, it's easy, it sees a lot of uptime, and getting your abilities back quick is almost always useful. Is that going to remain the case going forward though? I would say the answer is a solid probably. Exotics that can function in a class neutral sense have always been there when we needed them. I mean, look at when Stasis dropped in Beyond Light. Granted, that was a different day and age, and build crafting looks a lot different back then than it does now, but from the time that Stasis released till us as Warlocks got a dedicated Stasis exotic, it was over a full year. We didn't see one until the Osmiomancy gloves dropped in Witch Queen. So it was those subclass neutral exotics, like Eye of Another World, Mantle of Battle Harmony, NEZAREC'S that carried us through. Now Prismatic presumably won't be quite as limited in that respect, since we're essentially borrowing facets of our other subclasses. So you'd have to assume that once we do get those arc abilities unlocked, if you were to be wearing Crown of Tempest and proc Conduction Tines, you should be able to reap the benefits. At least I don't see any reason why you shouldn't. And assuming that's the case, I do think NEZAREC'S with Abyssal Extractors could be pretty handy. The proccing requirement of get kills with void damage is pretty lenient, and keeping all of our mixed and matched abilities on short cooldowns sounds like a pretty good deal to me. Another thing to consider, with Prismatic, you have your super meter, but then you also have your Transcendence meters. These fill up based on the type of damage that you're dealing, either light or dark. I don't think that there's any sort of passive regen tied to these bars, but I can't say that with 100% certainty. If there is a passive regen, NEZAREC'S may be able to boost it. Even if it can't though, it could really help out with your loadout diversity. Depending on what weapons you have access to, or what weapons you're selecting to bring into a specific activity, you could be put in a position where you're really going to need to lean on your abilities to supplement the other side. So, given NEZAREC'S inherent ability to keep them all on pretty short cooldowns, it could be a very handy tool in the right situation. Now, it is going to have some stiff competition going forward. Bungie did show off the new Mateo Doxia exotic chest piece that we're going to be getting in the final shape, and my initial impression of it, just based off the trailer that they showed us, is kind of mixed. But that Solipsism exotic class item, you know, the one where you get to mix and match exotic perks, that has my full attention. Bungie did give us the full list of perks that are going to be available to it in last week's TWAB, and there are some really interesting combinations. I definitely have my eyes on a few pairings, and I could sit here and theory craft till the cows come home, but I really only see one combo that could upend the ability regen gains of NEZAREC'S. That being Spirit of Inmost Light with Spirit of Harmony. You're getting your standard ability regen boost from the Titan's Heart of Inmost Light chest piece, while pulling the bonus super energy returns from Mantle of Battle Harmony. Would it be outright better than the improved regen speeds of NEZAREC'S? I can't say for sure right now. I'd definitely be wanting to test it if I can get that combo to roll out for me, but at the very least, they would parallel each other. And that pairing on the exotic class item would unshackle you from needing to bring void damage along. But at the end of the day, do I still see NEZAREC'S Sin as an exotic that I'm going to be using in final shape? Absolutely. It's effective, it's versatile, and it's been doing its thing since September of 2017. I am definitely excited for what's to come, and I am eager to experience all of the new that's happening with final shape. And if NEZAREC'S Sin continues to do a nice job at enhancing my gameplay experience, it's not going to be going in the vault anytime soon. But that's all I got for you in this one. Please remember to leave the video a like on your way out if you did enjoy it. Have a great day, Guardians, and I'll catch you on the next one.